Right now, your brain is lying to you. Not about everything. Not because it wants to, but it's twisting the truth in small, specific ways that change how you see your life, your past, your abilities, even the people around you. And the strangest part? You have no idea it's happening. Your brain loves you. It's working for you right now, keeping your heart beating, letting you understand these words, filtering through thousands of sounds and sensations so you can focus on what matters. It's trying its best. But here's the thing about trying your best with tools that were built a long time ago for a different world. Sometimes those tools don't quite fit anymore. Right now, you're breathing without thinking about it. You're processing language without sounding out each letter. Your brain handles all of this beautifully. To pull this off, though, it has to make guesses, take shortcuts. There's just too much happening every second, so it works out patterns, quick ways to make sense of things. And most of the time, these shortcuts work. They keep you safe. They help you make decisions fast enough to actually live your life. But sometimes these same shortcuts end up pointing you in the wrong direction. Not because your brain is broken, but because the world you live in now is so different from the world these shortcuts were designed for. Thousands of years ago, if you heard something moving in the grass and stopped to carefully think through whether it was the wind or something dangerous, well, you might not get a chance to finish that thought. The people who survived assumed the worst and ran first. That was smart then. That kept people alive. Now, though, the things that feel threatening usually aren't actually dangerous. They're a work email, a text that sounds off, someone's expression across the room, but your brain still treats them with the same urgency, the same rush of worry, because it's using the same old system. These 7 patterns we're going to walk through, these little ways your mind bends the truth without meaning to, they're not signs that something's wrong with you. Everyone has them. Everyone lives with a brain that's doing its absolute best, with instructions written for a different time. Understanding how this works can change how you see yourself, how you see your memories, and how you see other people. It won't make the patterns go away, but it might make them a little less powerful and a little easier to notice. And once you notice them, you get to decide what to do next. Before we start, if you like these gentle explainer videos for sleep, I'd appreciate if you click the like button and subscribe. Leave a comment on where in the world you're listening from. Now, take a deep breath and find a comfortable spot. Let's begin. Lie 1. The bad stuff matters more. 10 people tell you you did a good job. One person says something critical. Which one are you thinking about 3 hours later? You already know the answer. The criticism doesn't just stick around. It crowds out everything else. Your coworker says the presentation went really well. Your friend texts that they loved the dinner you made. A stranger smiles at you. Then someone makes one small comment. And suddenly, that's all you can hear. You replay it. You think about what you should have said back. This isn't you being too sensitive. This is just how brains work. When scientists measured what happens in people's brains while they looked at different images, some nice, some neutral, some upsetting, the brain lit up more for the bad ones. The reaction was faster, stronger, more focused. Your mind treats negative information like it's more important, like it needs more attention. And it does this automatically. You don't decide to focus on the bad stuff. It just happens. In relationships, one fight can make you forget a whole month of getting along. Research on marriages found that for people to feel good about their relationship, they need about 5 good interactions for every bad one. Not because anyone's counting, but because the bad moments land heavier. They sink in deeper. They last longer. The same thing shows up in what you remember. You probably can't recall last Tuesday if it was just a regular day. But if last Tuesday was the day you spilled coffee all over yourself right before a meeting, you remember that. Your brain keeps a collection of the hard moments and lets the easier ones fade away. There's a reason for this. The people you're descended from weren't the ones who spent a lot of time enjoying sunsets. They were the ones who heard a noise in the dark and got scared. The ones who remembered where the danger was. Missing out on something nice is just a missed opportunity. Missing something dangerous could be the end. In the world we live in now, though, most of the stuff that hurts isn't actually going to harm you. A bad performance review isn't going to end your life. An awkward moment at a party won't kill you. But your brain doesn't know that. It treats these moments like real emergencies. You can see this in the news. The scary stories spread faster. 200 people killed in crash travels through the internet like wildfire. 200 million flights landed safely this year doesn't go anywhere. Your brain pays more attention to bad news. The good stuff still matters. It does. But you need more of it to balance things out. One nice thing in your day probably won't be enough. You need several small good moments to stack up, to push back against the one bad moment taking up all the space in your head. So when you're lying here at 2 a.m, replaying that one weird interaction, while your brain conveniently forgets the 10 normal, fine interactions you had that same day, you're not broken. You're human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's just that what kept your ancestors alive sometimes keeps you up at night for no good reason. You can't get rid of this pattern. It's wired too deep. But you can start to recognize it. When you notice yourself stuck on the bad thing, you can stop and ask, is this really the whole story? Or is this just a loud part? Lie 2. You remember it correctly. There's this memory you have from when you were a kid. You can see it so clearly. You were maybe 7 or 8, wearing your red jacket, standing in your grandmother's kitchen while she baked cookies. You reached for something and knocked over the flour. It went everywhere. And instead of getting mad, she just laughed. You can picture this. You can almost feel it. Then one day, you're talking to your sibling, and you bring it up, and they look confused. You didn't have a red jacket, they say. And it wasn't flour, it was sugar. Or wait, maybe it wasn't at your grandmother's house at all. And suddenly, you're not sure anymore. Here's the thing about memory. It's not a video your brain saved somewhere. It's more like a story you tell yourself. And every time you tell it, the story changes a little bit. You're not pulling up a file. You're rebuilding the whole thing from pieces. Bits of what you saw, what you felt, what the room smelled like. And every time you rebuild it, you're working with pieces that might have shifted. Scientists have tested this in ways that are honestly a little unsettling. They can give people false memories that feel completely real. In one well-known set of studies, researchers talked to people about their childhoods, mixing in real events with one made-up story, usually something like getting lost in a mall. After talking about it a few times, a lot of people didn't just go along with the story. They remembered it. They added details the researchers never mentioned. They described how scared they felt. They were convinced it happened. These weren't people trying to lie. They genuinely believed the memory was real. When you try to remember something, your brain gathers up fragments from different places, then puts them together into something that makes sense. But making sense isn't the same as being accurate. Your brain fills in the empty spaces. It makes guesses. It borrows details from other, similar memories. And here's where it gets more complicated. How you feel right now changes how you remember things that happened before. If you're angry at someone today, you might remember old conversations with them as more negative than they actually were. The past gets rewritten by the present, and you don't even notice it happening. Think about eyewitness testimony in court. For a long time, if someone said, "I saw what happened, I remember exactly what they were wearing," that was considered really solid evidence. But research has shown it's not reliable at all. People who witness something can be completely sure about details and be totally wrong. And it's not that they're lying. They really do remember it that way. But the memory got built wrong from the start. Or it got changed by stress, or by questions people asked them later. What makes this so hard is that false memories don't feel false. They feel exactly the same as real ones. There's no little flag in your head that says, "Hey, this one's made up." You trust your memory because when you experience it, it feels like truth. But experience and truth aren't always the same thing. So when you're in an argument with someone about what actually happened, and you're both completely sure you're right, there's a good chance you're both wrong. You're both working from reconstructions, not recordings. You can't always trust your own mind about what happened. The best you can do is hold your memories a little more gently. Be willing to question them when someone else remembers it differently, and accept that the story you tell yourself about your past is exactly that, a story. Lie 3. You're right because you only see what confirms it. You believe something. Doesn't really matter what. Once you believe it, your brain becomes incredibly good at finding evidence that you're right. And you don't even do this on purpose. It just happens. Your mind filters the world through what you already think is true. And anything that matches gets highlighted. Anything that doesn't gets dimmed. Let's say you've decided a coworker doesn't like you. Now every single interaction gets read through that belief. They don't say hi in the hallway. Proof. They do say hi but seem distracted. Also proof. They're just being polite. They compliment your work. They're probably just trying to hide how they really feel. The thing is, if you believed they did like you, you'd interpret the exact same behaviors in the opposite way. Same evidence. Totally different conclusions. Researchers have watched this happen in studies. They give people information about something they already have an opinion on. Then watch how people react. If you support something and you read a study that agrees with you, you find it convincing. If you read a study that disagrees, you find problems with it. You question the methods. And here's the wild part. After reading evidence from both sides, people don't change their minds. They just get more convinced they were right all along. This plays out in your life in ways you don't see. Maybe you've decided you're not good at public speaking. So when you give a presentation and you see someone yawn, you notice. That sticks. But when someone nods along or looks engaged, you either don't see it or you think, they're just being polite. You're building a case against yourself. The internet has made this so much worse. The websites you use learn what you like and show you more of it. You end up in a bubble where everyone seems to agree with you. And that's because your corner of the internet has been shaped specifically to reflect what you already think. Even in science, where people are trained to question themselves, this is hard to fight. The scientific method exists partly because researchers kept accidentally designing experiments that proved what they already believed. Peer review exists partly because no one can fully escape their own bias. For most of us, there's no peer review. We just collect evidence that we're right, ignore evidence that we're wrong, and feel more and more certain. The scariest part is how invisible this is. You don't feel biased. You feel like you're just following where the evidence leads. But the evidence you're following got pre-selected by a filter you didn't know was running. Getting out of this takes something that feels almost impossible. Looking for reasons you might be wrong. On purpose. Actively seeking out information that contradicts what you believe. It's uncomfortable. It feels like betraying yourself. But the alternative is living in a world where you're always right, where everyone who disagrees is obviously wrong, and where what you believe hardens into something that can't be questioned. Lie 4. If you can remember it, it must be common. A plane crashes. Suddenly, everyone you know is nervous about flying. Never mind that millions of flights land safely every day. The crash was on the news. It was dramatic. You can picture it. And your brain treats that, how easy it is to remember, as evidence of how likely it is to happen. This is how you end up with a completely twisted sense of what's actually risky. Shark attacks get covered by the news. They're scary, visual, the kind of thing that sticks in your head. So when you think about swimming in the ocean, sharks come to mind right away. But you're more likely to be killed by a vending machine tipping over on you than by a shark. You're more likely to be struck by lightning. But you can picture a shark attack easily. You've seen the movies. The image comes up fast in your mind. A vending machine accident. That's hard to imagine. Forgettable. Your brain uses memory as a shortcut for figuring out how often something happens. If examples come to mind quickly, you assume it happens a lot. If you have to work to think of examples, you assume it's rare. But frequency isn't the only thing that makes memory stick. Drama makes memory stick. Emotion makes memory stick. So rare but dramatic events feel common, while common but boring events feel rare. Think about how much attention violent crime gets. The news covers it constantly, so people tend to think crime is going up, even when actual statistics show it's been going down for years. The coverage makes it memorable. Memorable feels frequent. Meanwhile, heart disease kills way more people than violent crime, but it's slow and quiet and doesn't make for good television. So people underestimate the risk. This shows up in your personal life too. Maybe you know someone who went through a really messy divorce. It was dramatic. It was painful to watch. Now when you think about marriage, that example jumps right to your mind, and you might start thinking divorce is more common than it actually is. Not because you looked at any statistics, just because the example is so vivid. Advertisers and politicians understand this deeply. They know facts don't stick the way stories do. You forget a statistic about job growth, but you remember the story about one person who lost their job and couldn't pay rent. That story shapes how you think about the economy, even if it's not representative. This is why one person's story feels like such strong evidence. I know someone who smoked every day and lived to be 90. Feels more convincing than all the research showing that smoking kills. The research is abstract. Your great uncle with his cigarettes is a real person with a real story. Your experiences matter. They do. But one experience isn't the same as a trend. Your friend's bad reaction to a medication doesn't mean the medication doesn't work. The fix is just awareness. When you find yourself certain about how common or rare something is, you can pause and ask, am I basing this on actual numbers, or on how easily I can remember examples? Easy to remember doesn't mean it happens a lot, but your brain uses that shortcut anyway. Lie 5. Everyone else sees it too. You're looking at the world, taking it in, and what you see feels obvious, clear, true. You're not interpreting anything. You're just seeing what's there. If someone disagrees with you, They must be missing something. This feeling that you see things as they really are is so strong, it's hard to believe it could be wrong. But it is. Everyone feels this way, including the people who completely disagree with you. Two people can watch the exact same thing happen and walk away with totally different stories about what they just saw. A political debate, for instance. One person watches and sees their candidate winning. Another person watches the same debate and sees the complete opposite. Both are certain. Both feel like they're being fair and objective. This isn't stubbornness. This is just how seeing works. You don't see reality directly. You see it through a lens made up of everything you already believe, everything you've experienced, what you expect to see, what you're feeling. That lens is invisible to you. You think you're looking at the world. You're actually looking at your brain's best guess about what's out there. And that creates this awful loop in conflicts. You think your view is obviously correct. They think their view is obviously correct. Neither of you can understand how the other person is missing something so clear. So you both decide the other person must be irrational or dishonest. And it becomes almost impossible to have any empathy because you can't imagine how a reasonable person could see it that way. Arguments get worse because of this. You're not just defending an opinion. You feel like you're defending reality itself. Agreeing with the other person would mean giving up on the truth. So you dig in harder, and the gap between you gets wider. In politics, you see this everywhere. People on opposite sides aren't just disagreeing about what should be done. They're disagreeing about what's actually happening in the world, because they're taking in the same information through completely different filters. Even scientists fall into this. Researchers looking at the same data can reach opposite conclusions, each one convinced their reading is the only reasonable one. This happens in small ways too. You watch a movie and think it's clearly terrible. Someone else watches the same movie and thinks it's brilliant. You can't understand how they're missing the bad acting. They can't understand how you're missing the emotional depth. Same movie, different experiences. This makes compromise really hard, because compromise feels like accepting a lie. If you really do see things as they are, and the other person is wrong, why would you meet in the middle? Better to stick to what you know is right and wait for them to figure it out. Except they're thinking the exact same thing. Breaking out of this requires something most people find nearly impossible. Really considering that you might not see things as they actually are. That your view might be just as filtered as anyone else's. That the other person isn't stupid. They're just seeing through a different lens. When you catch yourself thinking, how can they not see this? It's so obvious. That's the moment to pause. That feeling of obviousness is the signal. If it were actually obvious, there wouldn't be disagreement. You'll never fully get past this. You can't step outside your own mind and see the world without any filter. But you can remember the filter is there. And you can stop assuming that everyone who sees it differently is just missing what you see, when the reality is, they might be seeing something you're completely missing. Lie 6. You know more than you do, or less than you do. You pick up something new, a hobby, a skill, a subject you're learning about. You get the basics down, understand a few concepts, practice a little, and pretty quickly, you start to feel like you've got a handle on it. You feel competent. You might even feel confident enough to give advice. This is usually the exact moment when you know the least about how much you don't know. People who are new to something tend to overestimate how much they understand, not because they're full of themselves, but because they don't have enough knowledge yet to see what they're missing. You can't see the gaps if you don't know the gaps exist. Meanwhile, People who are actual experts often display more caution and awareness. They've spent years learning, seeing all the weird exceptions and debates. They know how much they still don't know. So they're careful. They hedge. They don't like to make strong claims because they understand how much room there is for doubt. This creates a weird dynamic. The people who know the least often speak with the most confidence. Those with genuine expertise speak with more caution. And if you're just listening, confidence sounds like knowledge. There was research done on this back in the late 90s. Scientists gave college students tests, then asked them to guess how well they'd done. The students who scored in the bottom quarter thought they'd done way better than they actually had. The students who scored in the top quarter were more accurate, though they still tended to slightly overestimate. The big finding was that the gap between what people thought and what was real was huge for people who didn't understand much. This happens because judging how good you are at something requires the same skills as actually being good at it. To know if you're doing well, you need to understand what doing well looks like. Beginners don't have that yet. This is everywhere in daily life. Someone reads a few articles about a topic and suddenly feels qualified to have strong opinions about complicated issues. Someone takes a weekend workshop and starts giving advice, like they've been at it for years. And it's not that these people are faking it. They really believe they understand. Their lack of knowledge makes them unable to see how much they're missing. In politics, this is a mess. Complicated issues need nuance, expertise, and understanding of trade-offs. But nuance doesn't sound confident. Simple answers do. So politicians who offer easy solutions to hard problems often win people over, because the confidence reads as competence. Doctors deal with this too. Patients who've spent some time searching online sometimes feel qualified to question their doctor's advice. Meanwhile, the doctor who spent years in training might express some uncertainty about the best approach because they understand how much can vary. Confidence is a terrible way to judge how much someone actually knows. The loudest person might be the one who understands the least. Seeing this in yourself is hard. If you're new to learning something, you probably feel more sure of yourself than you should. And you won't realize it because realizing it requires exactly the knowledge you don't have yet. The best defense is just being honest about what you actually know. If you spend 10 hours learning about something, you don't know as much as someone who spent 10 years. And when you feel really sure about something you only recently learned, pause. Ask yourself if you're confusing the feeling of understanding with actually understanding. Ask what you might be missing. The confidence that comes from shallow knowledge feels good. It feels certain. But that certainty is often the clearest sign you're out of your depth. Lie 7. This moment defines everything. You make a mistake at work. Not a huge one, but people noticed. Maybe you sent an email to the wrong person, or you missed a deadline, or you stumbled through a presentation. And right away, your brain jumps to the conclusion you're going to get fired. Not maybe. You're certain. You can see it happening. Your boss loses faith in you. This one mistake becomes the thing everyone remembers about you. Or maybe it's social. You said something awkward at a gathering. The conversation went quiet for a second. Someone gave you a look, and your mind races ahead. Everyone thinks you're weird now. They're going to avoid you. You've ruined how people see you. These thoughts don't feel like you're overreacting. They feel like you're just seeing what's coming. Your brain takes one bad thing that happened and stretches it out into a whole terrible future. This happens because your brain is built to watch for threats. And when it spots something going wrong, it doesn't just look at what's happening right now. It projects forward. It imagines worst-case scenarios. In theory, this could be useful. In practice, it's almost always way off. The huge majority of things you worry about like this don't happen. The mistake at work gets mentioned once and forgotten. Your boss barely thinks about it. Your co-workers already moved on. The awkward thing you said at the party is gone from everyone's mind within minutes. But your brain doesn't know that yet. In the moment, the disaster feels real and close. This happens because feelings seem like facts. When you're anxious, everything feels dangerous. When you're embarrassed, you feel exposed. Your emotional state colors what you think is going to happen, and you mistake the feeling for an accurate prediction. But feelings are just reactions. They tell you something about what's happening inside you, not necessarily about what's actually going to happen out there. And here's the problem. When you start thinking about disasters, your body responds like the disaster is already happening. Your heart speeds up, your muscles tense, and those physical feelings make you more convinced that something terrible really is coming, which makes you more anxious. It's a spiral. Research shows that people who do this regularly have higher stress levels and are more likely to struggle with anxiety and depression. If you're constantly bracing for disaster, your body never really relaxes. You also tend to think pain will last longer than it actually does. You predict that if something bad happens, you'll feel awful for a very long time. But people are tougher than that. They adapt. They heal. But when you're in the moment, imagining the worst, you don't factor in how resilient you actually are. This is especially true with social stuff. You think if you embarrass yourself, people will remember forever. But people are way more focused on themselves than on you. That thing you said that felt mortifying. They forgot about it before you even got home. But you'll replay it for weeks. Same with work mistakes. You think one error will define you forever. But your boss has seen hundreds of mistakes from dozens of people. Yours isn't special. Breaking this pattern means doing something uncomfortable. Sitting with the worry without acting on it. Noticing the catastrophic thought. Recognizing it as just a thought. And waiting to see what actually happens. Most of the time, what happens is nothing. The disaster you imagine doesn't show up. And every time that happens, you get a little more evidence that these thoughts aren't reliable predictions. This doesn't mean bad things never happen. They do. But they're rarely as bad as your brain tells you they'll be. And they're rarely permanent. One moment doesn't define everything. One mistake doesn't erase your value. Life is longer than any single moment. People forget. Most things that feel enormous right now shrink with time. The lie isn't that nothing bad will ever happen. The lie is that this bad thing will be the end of everything. It won't be. Almost nothing is. These 7 patterns, they're not things you can just decide to stop doing. They're part of how human minds work. Your brain didn't develop to give you perfect truth. It developed to keep you alive. And for that, it needed to be fast, not accurate. It needed shortcuts that worked well enough, even if they weren't precise. And most of the time, this works out fine. You get through your days. You make reasonable choices. You function. But these shortcuts create blind spots. And those blind spots shape everything. How you see yourself, how you remember your past, how you think about your future, how you relate to people. Understanding these patterns won't make them disappear. You'll still focus more on negative stuff. You'll still remember things wrong. You'll still look for evidence that you're right. But understanding gives you something important. A choice. When you catch yourself in one of these patterns, you can stop. You can ask yourself if the story your brain is telling is the whole story, or just the loudest part. You can question it. You can notice when the bad is drowning out the good. You can hold your memories more gently, knowing they're reconstructions. You can seek out information that challenges you. You can check whether something is actually common or just easy to remember. You can consider that other people might be seeing something you're not. You can be honest about the limits of what you know. You can question your worst-case predictions and see what actually happens. None of this is easy. Your brain pushes back. These patterns are automatic, invisible, deeply built in. But noticing is the first step. You can't change what you don't see. And once you see it, you get to choose how to respond. This isn't about becoming perfectly rational. You won't be. Nobody is. It's about recognizing the distance between what your mind tells you and what's actually true, and learning to navigate that gap with a little more skill, a little more humility, a little more kindness toward yourself and toward other people. Your brain is doing the best it can with the tools it has. Those tools aren't perfect. They come from a different time, built for different problems, but they're yours. And understanding how they work means you're not just at their mercy anymore. You can question the stories without hating yourself for believing them. Because these patterns aren't proof that you're broken. They're proof that you're human. And being human means living with a mind that sometimes points you in the wrong direction, and learning to navigate that with as much grace as you can manage. Thanks for being here. Sleep well.